very warm welcome to Capital Sports 3.0. I am your co-host for this evening. I'll have three other wonderful hosts with me in just one moment. But before we go anywhere, there's an awful lot to get through and an awful lot to explain about what's happening tonight. Now, the sports world has been buzzing this week. So much is going on. One of my not favorite topics, of course, doping in sport was right to the forefront tonight, and very, very interesting. When I say very interesting, it came from a place that genuinely shocked me quite a little bit, but also shocked me at the same time as well. Also, we've had the Euro 2024 draw, a lot of interesting groups, and also a question of who cannot play against each other. Yeah, it really came to the fore today with so many countries not allowed to be in the same group. Very, very silly, very, very childish, but also, there is a reason and political reason behind it as well. Also, and importantly as well, we're always covering Brittany Griner because it's an important situation where an athlete, one who I have interviewed, one who I've met personally once, who we spoke with before and actually gave the information where she had been quite poorly treated by her own government. We spoke with her before, and we're going to speak with her again this evening because there is an update on that as well. And I have a very interesting couple of videos for our guys and girl, and also an interesting kind of quiz question at the very end for them all to try and solve at the same time. And of course, one thing, we're going to have a bit of a look at a video a little bit later on about Gary Neville, because of course he is the one who has been fighting for a lot of different rights, fighting against the European Super League, fighting for people's rights. There's a lot of good he does, a lot of great things he does, and I have huge admiration and huge time for the man. He also had a terrific kind of behind-the-scenes look at Qatar last week. His video came out on his the overlap. Really interesting. He asked hard questions. They were answered, and it actually made me feel not much better than I did before about Qatar, but he actually asked the questions which a lot of media people are unwilling to ask. And then it turns out that he's going to work for Qatar as a commentator during the World Cup. And a big, big scandal it was this week as well. So we're going to discuss that in just a moment. So I'm going to bring in everyone into our show this evening. Cian McGibney, Isel Cody, Andrew Flint, a very warm welcome to you all this lovely, wonderful Sunday evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay. So I'm going to start off with this, and we're going to have a little bit of I'll say a bet, because we'll be here when this situation wraps up. The draw for Euro 2020 was made today. The finals, of course, are going to be held in Germany in a couple of years' time. Qualifying starts in March next year. These are the groups. So you can see how it looks. There are 8 groups. The top 2 go through automatically. There are also playoff places guaranteed based on European Nations League results in this current cycle. For example, Kazakhstan, who are the 4th seeds in Group H, they are guaranteed a playoff for Euro 2024. So back to our folks here this evening. I'm going to start off ladies first. Isolt, Ireland in a terrific group. It looks tough, but the French have been well known to raise a white flag at the first sign of any trouble. The others in the group, the Dutch, well, I mean, they can be, give them a good night out in Temple Bar and then a result in Amsterdam, and that's fine. Greece, well, we're talking about double Dutch and speaking Greek. The Greeks, they were fairly beaten by Sparta. And Gibraltar, listen, it's a rock with a bunch of monkeys on top. I think Ireland should be okay. So which of those groups do you fancy is going to be the one that everyone's going to be talking about?
I suppose when I look at the groups, I think England, Italy, the group, because obviously Ukraine are in it, there will be a lot of focus, media focus on the group at group stage, irrespective of how the games are actually going in the competitive level. I love your enthusiasm for Ireland. I saw the group and practically needed a lie down, and I'm sure Stephen Kenny was thinking similarly. But look, it's great to be enthusiastic. We're at the point now where we've had a series of games where Ireland are showing, just from an Irish point of view, they're showing a different, maybe at least a consistent style of play. The results aren't always going our way, but I think we're not going into a tournament for once absolutely terrified of ending up last at qualifying stage. But Gibraltar, they'll be a good 5th position in the group, and we will hopefully come ahead of them. That's the main thing. I think it's difficult as an Irish fan, even with recent performances being better, performances being better don't mean results are better, and I think that's the difficulty. I think if we're talking about groups that are always going to get a lot of eyes on them, England will get an interest irrespective, especially because there's been so much in the last few weeks in relation to their camp and in relation to players and the focus they have outside due to their performances with their clubs. Obviously Trent in that case. Ukraine, it's going to get a lot of interest in terms of how they're performing. I actually probably think the most interesting group, if we're to look at them all, probably Group A. I think it'll just be a bit more fun. You'll have competitive games. Maybe potentially you could look at Group H, but I really think Group C is going to be a lot of the focus in terms of qualification. And look, Ireland have some tough games. They have 2 games I'd be slightly more confident in. But when I say confident, that doesn't mean a win.
Okay. All right. I'm going to ask this all in a moment, but I'll get everyone's opinion first. Andrew, England, I mean, as the English media and fans all ask Scotland to do to allow Ukraine to progress to the World Cup, will England be allowing Ukraine to progress to the European Championships? Because, of course, we do know that they're going to co-host a World Cup with Spain and Portugal. So maybe they just need to practice to play in a World Cup and have a bit of crack.
Well, I think quite a lot, depends on who the manager will be. And there's quite a lot of talk after England's dreadful Nations League campaign, where they were relegated from a group including Hungary, that Gareth Southgate may call it a day after the tournament. He extended his contract, I think, until after Euro 2024, but will he still be there by then? I think Qatar World Cup could be quite important for that. And the reason I say that's the main factor for me is simply because Southgate will get them qualified if he's in charge. I'm not saying he's going to play the most expansive football, but he's getting quite a lot of criticism from a certain northwestern city for not playing their golden boy at right back, which quite frankly I think is the right decision. It's one of the few things he's got right, leaving Trent Alexander-Arnold out. But Italy are a team we just can't beat. 4 times we've failed to beat them since losing the Euros final last summer. But on paper, top 2 from a group that includes Malta, North Macedonia, who, don't forget, knocked Italy out of Qatar qualification for the World Cup. So they're no mugs, but they have lost their all-time top goal scorers retired. So there shouldn't be as much of a threat. It'll be an emotional game for Ukraine for a lot of people for, a number of reasons. But I do think England will qualify. I don't think they'll have too much trouble, but I certainly don't think they're going to qualify as group winners from that one.
Okay. Cian, how about you on this? I mean, it's a good one. Ireland, okay, Isolt is slightly less positive than I am. Andrew's positive about England. I mean, poor old Scotland look like they're going to get a hammer, and they're going to, like, Alf-Inge Haaland's going to jump up and down on them, or whatever Haaland doing for, keep scoring all the goals. He's going to batter them. But what group is interesting for you?
I think Group A, actually. Now that you mention Alf-Inge Haaland, I hope he doesn't play for Norway. I hope his son is actually the man that takes to the field when they play. I know he could still probably stick a few into the net, but I hope it's Erling that gets the opportunity to play. But definitely Scotland, given that we've seen them play against Ireland in the recent past, they've played extremely well over the last a couple of qualifying campaigns. I know Euro 2020 didn't go quite well for them, but they've played very, very well. They're in a competitive group, and I'd like to see them get through. I think they've performed remarkably well in different qualifying campaigns. As I say, I know Euro 2020 didn't go according to plan for them, but they're definitely a side that would deserve an opportunity at another European Championships, and see how they get on.
Listen, that's fair enough. I'm with you on that. So I'm going to ask you all now as we go along. Group A, starting with the person who finished last, Cian, who's going to come out first and second in Group A?
Spain, and I'm probably going to have to stick with Scotland, seeing as I bigged them up there.
All right. Isolt.
Spain, Scotland. And I actually think it's handy that they're in the order for the first few groups. I think they're probably going to come out in.
Okay. Andrew.
Easily Spain and Norway. Georgia probably finished third with Kvaratskhelia tearing everything up. No, actually, genuinely seriously, I'm not saying it's an increment. I actually do think Norway will spring a surprise.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards that as well. Okay, Andrew, start off Group B. Who's going to come out on top of that? And be careful here. Just 3 Irish people on this call.
One of whom is a realist.
Ask me this one.
Yeah.
Well, okay. The honest answer is I think France will win the group. Netherlands could absolutely run away with it or have an absolute collapse. I do think Netherlands will finish second, I'm afraid. But could it finally be revenge in Paris? Let's hope.
Okay. Isolt.
I actually think Netherlands, France. I do think that'll be the order. I think France will turn up at tournament stage. I don't think qualifier stage. Just a personal opinion.
Cian?
Yeah, I'm going to have to stick with the 2 colleagues. Yeah, Netherlands and France probably. My optimism is dwindling, given our last couple of qualifying campaigns.
Group C then. Group C. Cian.
Italy and just to be controversial, Ukraine.
Okay. So England have lost Eurovision to them, and now qualification. Again, that Eurovision was the greatest disgrace. Oh God. Anyway, right. Isolt.
Oh God. Italy and I'm going to have to say England are going to go through, but I think that's, as Andrew rightly pointed out, Gareth Southgate. He's a man for qualifying a team, not for winning anything.
Okay.
And they've had many of those managers.
Okay.
Sadly, yes.
Andrew?
Yeah, for me, easy. Italy and England.
Okay.
Top 2.
Very quickly, Andrew, with you, Group D.
Croatia stand out, although their best players are getting older. But I think Wales do stand a very good chance. They've got a wave of optimism, good form. So I think Croatia, Wales, top 2.
Isolt?
Croatia, Wales, top 2. That's what I was saying. I'm going with my list.
All right. And Cian?
I'd stick with the same 2, Croatia and Wales. Croatia to top the group.
Oh, okay, very good. Isolt's Group E.
Group E does absolutely nothing for me in terms of excitement. Like, not one of those games that I really want to watch. To be honest, if they played their own little tournament and came back and just elected someone to go through, it'd be great. But I'm going to stick again. I think Poland and Czechoslovakia, purely because, oh God, all the games will be fairly depressing. Will I put Albania to be different? No, it's going to be Poland, Czechoslovakia for me. I just...
Andrew?
Much as I'd love to say Faroe Islands to sneak through, no, Poland, Czechia, definitely.
Okay, and Cian?
We're not doing you any favours this evening. Same 2 with Poland to top the group.
Okay, all right, Isolt, Group F. That's a tasty one. That's a group of death now for me.
That's a really tough one. I think I would probably go... Oh, I have it between which 2 are going through, but I think I'm going to go with Belgium and Sweden.
All right. Yeah. Azerbaijan have no mugs. They could throw a grenade in there.
I actually think that... I think you're going to have the toughest games in terms of they're all going to be proper competitions in comparison with some of the other groups where there's such a disparity. Exactly. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And Estonia, I think, are going to be a team to watch. Just I have this feeling that they're motivated. Cian, how about for you? Cian, you're muted. You've done an Alan.
That's how he feels about this group.
Yeah,
I think Belgium and Sweden. I think both sides have done very, very well. So Belgium to top that group.
Andrew?
I actually fancy Austria here much more. Sweden are one of the most boring sides of all time since Zlatan retired, and Austria's squad is an unbelievable quality. They've underperformed for a while, and I think they should finally get into a finals here.
So who do you got? Austria and?
Austria and Belgium. So Belgium is too obvious for me. So
all right. Okay, Andrew, sticking with you. That's a real Balkans battle there, except for Lithuania, of course, which is up in the Baltics. But very interesting. Bulgaria are dreadful at the moment. They couldn't kick snow off a rope. Montenegro are so, but Hungary and Serbia, because of course this admittance by the Serbian Prime Minister that America wanted, was it Hungary to invade Serbia or vice versa?
Christ. We're going for the nice easy predictions here, aren't we? On non-controversial ones. Now, Hungary on brilliant form. They've got some match winners in there. Serbia have, Alexander Mitrovic alone is going to qualify them with its unbelievable international strike rate. I can't imagine that it'll be other than Hungary, Serbia. But you never know. Those Montenegro, Bulgaria can be difficult away from home, but Hungary, Serbia, I think.
Yeah. Cian?
Serbia and Bulgaria.
Oh, very good. Interesting on that. Yeah. Okay, Isolt. It used to be Serbia and Montenegro. Now it's just Serbia and Montenegro separate. So who are you going for?
I'm going for Hungary and Serbia.
All right, that's playing it nice and safe. Two nice countries, lots of nice food.
I thought this was a prediction game. It's not about playing it safe. It's about trying to be accurate. The concept is lost on you.
Isolt, Group H for you to start with.
Well, it's Denmark and it's Finland for me.
Oh, okay. So it's going to be a
even though I think I see a lot of Scandi boring teams progressing, but Denmark obviously I don't consider as boring because they have Legoland. They're kind of cool. That's my take on it for this evening.
Andrew.
I do like that logic. No, Denmark for me to win it. I think Slovenia to go for a second, although I'm going to say it's a very outside dark horse. I think Kazakhstan could potentially, if they get a good start to that campaign, they're so hard to beat away. We've seen them batter Scotland a couple of years ago, 4-0. But yeah, I think Slovenia, Denmark, but Kazakhstan may spring a surprise there.
Okay, remember Kazakhstan have automatically qualified for a playoff position anyway, but if they can qualify automatically in second place, that will shock the group. Cian, for you on that one?
Denmark and Northern Ireland.
Oh, all right. So yeah, interesting. Okay, Cian, staying with you for Group I, which is a controversial of groups. Switzerland, a team from Asia, and then of course Kosovo. Who's going to go through on that?
Switzerland and Romania, I think.
Right, that's fair enough. All right, Romania on the downers, but you never know. Isolt.
To be honest, Switzerland, and after that, I couldn't say Romania, but I could possibly stretch to Israel just being ridiculous, because I think all you want is lots of teams that are going to have awkward games against other nations. That's what I want from a tournament. And since the Russians aren't around, you need to get those games elsewhere.
Exactly. Andrew.
Yeah, Switzerland, they'll go through comfortably. I honestly think it's a lottery between pretty much Israel, Romania, Kosovo. I'm going to say Kosovo is a dark horse. They've got one or two players who I've seen in Russian Premier League more closely, and they could be tricky. I think that's sneaking suspicion Kosovo.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. And final group, which I think Portugal run away with, and then there are 4 teams vying for the second spot. Isolt, I'll start with you on this one. So who apart from Portugal will come through from that group?
I think strangely I thought I'd be going with Iceland. I'm not. I'm going to go with Slovakia. Just because I think they're a very tough team to play against. And I think they will make it more difficult for their opponents. And I think teams having to I just think they're a really awkward team, and maybe that's just recent memory has sort of changed my view in that. I think they're a more difficult team and they're a more physical team than some of the others, which may give them an advantage. But Portugal romp home in that one, and I think second is whoever. Yeah,
no, I think you've nailed down. That's okay. Cian.
Portugal and Iceland.
All right. Andrew.
I would have said Iceland, Portugal, obviously. I would have said Iceland about 2 or 3 years ago, but I got a sneaking suspicion Luxembourg might bring a surprise here. They've been getting better and better with some genuine experience in there. but very, very close fight, I think, for that second spot. But I'm going to say Luxembourg.
Yeah, I said it to Keane before we come on. Like, Luxembourg were able to beat Ireland. Luxembourg for the players who are playing in UEFA competition. They're playing in Champions League, Europa League, and Conference League, and that is worth its weight in gold. Remember as well, Kosovo have beaten Cyprus home and away on a 7-1 scoreline. They've also beaten Northern Ireland. Well, I guess that's not too difficult to do. They've also drawn with Greece as well in recent years. So they're not. They're no mugs. They are no mugs, and they're going to be very, very good to beat as well, or hard to beat as well. This next slide I'm going to put up is. I just want to comment, very quick comment, like a few seconds or a minute from each of you. Prohibited team clashes. Armenia cannot play Azerbaijan. They can bomb the crap out of each other, but they can't play football against each other. Belarusia, who are, they can't play against Ukraine for whatever reason. Gibraltar can't play Spain. Kosovo can't play Bosnia, and Kosovo cannot play Serbia. Starting off, Andrew, is there logic behind that madness?
No, I think there is. I think it's, some people may say slightly overcautious. I'd say definitely be overcautious, just to avoid any potential distraction, political outbursts, whatever may or may not happen. I think it's just not worth the bother. You may be overthinking it, but better to overthink it, I think, than let a potential situation run out of hand. So, but personally, I'd say it's fine.
Easels.
I agree a lot with what Andrew has said there, in terms of that you don't want to have a situation outside the game. But I would think at some point we need to get to a place where we can have certain games that would previously have been prohibited and just have them without fans initially and work from there. The intention is sport is meant to be unifying, not dividing.
Okay. Cian.
Yeah, I think I have to agree there. I think we all saw what happened in 1993 when Ireland played England, or Ireland played Northern Ireland, the animosity at that time. So you could definitely, even 28, 29 years on, you could still put the same type of logic to most of those fixtures. Definitely, like he's all said, certainly try and play the games, try and break away from the not playing them straight away, try and break away from it and put a trial period in place of maybe 2 or 3 years or 2 or 3 campaigns and see how you get on if those ties were to come up in future campaigns.
That is fair enough. I always say that, like, if fans can't behave themselves, just, put the countries out of competition. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
You're banned for this cycle, your senior team, and then you come back in second cycle, because that's when the money comes in to fund all your teams beneath them. Very, very quickly, we'll talk very quickly about Live Golf, of course. Sorry, there was a message from our friends in Verona saying that Ukraine could beat England. Well, fair enough. That's Russians calling it for Ukraine.
We will all be cheering for them, and anyone else.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people in Russia who'll be cheering for Ukraine. Strangely. Fresh Bowl, of course, Live, the Saudi-backed golf tour. They wanted to have world ranking points, but of course, it is not going to happen. A strange one. They got 2 more events to go. Isa, very quick word on this. Live, I mean, they've got two to go. They spent a lot of money. They've got a lot of headlines. Is this going to be alive next year, or is Live Golf going to die a death now that Saudi have gotten their way by, decreasing the output of oil?
I certainly think that we will see Live ahead certainly running into 2023 and 2024. I think this is a real big body blow for them, and I think unfortunately, while they've got all the big names, when you have they've a huge amount of scalps in terms of players who have signed up with them. But the difficulty is, if it doesn't count in terms of world ranking points, then for golfers who haven't decided whether or not they're going to go, it very much makes their mind up for them. Because if Live Golf doesn't, as you just put it, if it doesn't continue into the future, yes, they'll make huge money, but these are guys who huge money seems to be a necessity to fund their lifestyles, Phil Nicholson. So Big Phil obviously needs a lot of money to get through the days, as does Dustin Johnson, given the astronomical amounts. Realistically, do I think Liv will ever get to where they wanted it to get to? No. I think this is a failed project for Greg Norman, even though it will make him enormously wealthy.
Okay. I mean, it is a case that, they wanted to get world ranking points for our players to be recognized as a tour. It doesn't seem to happen. Quick word from Andrew and Cian. Cian, starting with you. I mean, Liv, a lot of money put into it, a lot of big names coming into it. He still seems to think that in a couple of years, it's going to run out of steam, or maybe run out of money.
Don't think it'll run out of money. It might run out of steam, but it's probably going to take 2 or 3, maybe 4 years for it to run out of steam. I think there's enough players still there, and I know the ranking point situation has come into firm view in the last week to 10 days. So it's definitely going to, as Isol pointed out, it's definitely going to make it a harder decision for some of the players that have been sitting on the fence. Do I step away from one tour and move on to this tour? It's definitely going to be an interesting thing to see over the next couple of years, because, as I say, I don't see the Live Tour going away anytime soon.
Okay. Andrew, we spoke about this before, we covered it. Does it really matter that they don't get world ranking points? Will golfers just stay for the money?
Well, that's actually the line I was leaning more towards. The move that most golfers have made for this is, well, it's just an excruciating amount of money. Is that really, if they've moved to it, they knew the risks, they knew that it wasn't already aligned when they signed up, and they knew that there was no certainty of it being aligned with the majors and being allowed to participate in them. That's not the reason they moved. They moved for the possibly excitement of a new project, but the money is a large part of it. Personally, I don't see Liv taking this momentary defeat lying down. I think they will fight for all it's worth to get rankings points for perhaps the next season, if that is enough time. It should be, I would imagine. I can't believe they're going to allow themselves to fail. I don't think it is going away, and I think they will possibly lose some players, but not as many as perhaps the PGA Tour would hope they would.
Okay, no, that is actually fair enough. I think it's good. The next one we're going to have a look at is this one, which again is Saudi related. 440 billion mega city in the desert to host the 2029 Asian Winter Games. Now, as someone who lived in Saudi Arabia, who traveled quite extensively in Saudi Arabia, there is snow in Saudi. If you go down the south towards the Yemeni border, which I wouldn't want to do now because they've been firing rockets up into Jeddah, which is it's still not far away from the Yemeni border. But up in the mountains, you basically think you're in Gibraltar because there's monkeys everywhere. And little monkeys running around the place. It's amazing. There's snow there, rain, fog. It's gorgeous landscape, absolutely up above as Taif and up that area. It's absolutely gorgeous. But Isel, would you be interested to go to watch a Winter Games in Saudi Arabia?
I'm renaming this sports snowing rather than washing. Do you like what I've done there? That's how I feel about it. Christ almighty, will the Winter Games on a global scale not stop for a minute, whether they're going for an Asian, a European, or a world level? Stop and think about where they're going for a second. Just think it through. Sit down. Everyone have cool heads in a cool place, and don't go, do you know what? It's been a bit of scandal about Saudi Arabia hosting things. Maybe we won't go there. Oh, we're going to have a purpose-built city in the desert. Sure, why not? It's different than allowing Saudi investors into a global sport or into a sports team. This is specifically directing your events there. And this is what boxing has done repeatedly in the last number of years, and Formula One. It's not letting them come into your tournaments to sports wash on another platform. It's physically going to them and saying, here you go, here's the tournament. Do it for us. Look, Andrew, we're going to Qatar for a World Cup. Can I really care at this stage? Exactly. Yeah,
you know, one funny thing, I heard complaints. This is so funny. I heard complaints, really big complaints, from an English and an American journalist who are here covering the World Cup in Russia, and they complain about distances. Distances are terrible. And I watched the same two guys this week on I heard one guy, watched one guy, one on BBC and one on an American channel, complaining about how close all the venues are together in Qatar. And I'm like, Andrew, good or bad thing to have Winter Games on the Red Sea?
Well, I can't believe I'm saying this, and maybe I've been sports snowed, but I actually think, genuinely, seriously, if this was happening in most countries in the world, I'd say this is a complete waste of time. It's it's just lifting it there for the sake of it. I've looked at what the project is doing. The finances clearly are not an issue, so there's no point trying to say they're not going to complete the project. We know that Saudi has plenty of money to do this, and they want to build this quite insane futuristic city, which I'm sure will be very popular for people who are, let's say, partners with Saudi Arabia. I don't think a winter sports village would be entirely wasted in the way that it would be in perhaps other cities, where there just simply isn't going to be an influx of tourism, fake tourism, whatever you want to call it. I can see, of all places to have a purpose-built venue, I think Saudi would pull it off, because they're so hell-bent on trying to prove that they can do it.
Look, they
will support it.
A high-tech city with huge high-tech infrastructure, with experts from the world, between Jeddah and Mecca. Now, there is a thing in the Quran that if Jeddah and Mecca meet, it's Armageddon.
Oh, great.
Don't tell that to Vladimir Putin or to
Vladimir that sounds good compared to what we have nowadays, right?
Well, since Zelensky's been calling for nuclear strikes, please don't. Stop building. Cian, I mean, they could hold it down in Karsavine or up in Karantoul or something like that, winter games, but there's not enough snow, is there?
There isn't enough snow in Saudi Arabia until you pointed it out. But I think, look, we've had a World Cup in Qatar, or we're about to have a World Cup in Qatar, so I think all bets are off. So look, a Winter Games in Saudi Arabia in 2029, I'm sure a lot of the winter athletes are thrilled to be going to a place like that where there is no actual snow and it'll all have to be brought in from somewhere. So it's definitely going to be a very, very interesting one. If it does come to pass, more than likely, as we've seen, it will come to pass, and we will have a Winter Olympics in Saudi Arabia, of all places, more than likely in 2029.
Why don't they just position themselves up in the lovely mountains that Alan has referenced, except for the fact that, you know, their neighbours are bombing them and they're bombing them back, kind of thing?
Yeah. But this is the whole thing. They're not used those mountains, Isolt. They're actually up.
No, I know.
They're up in the Gulf of Aqaba. They're up in Tabuk. And this is what, like, the mountains are great there. They're gorgeous. I mean, it's
apart
stunning.
from the bombing.
Apart from the bombings, and the fellas walking around stoned out of their heads with cat. They're chewing the cat like the same as Mo Farah does. And they're with big daggers in their belts and these old flintlock muskets. It's gorgeous. Right, moving very, very quickly on. We're going to take a very short break, and then we'll come back with Brittany Griner and one other very, very brief story before we go on to our boxing, madness. So we'll just mute our mics and be back in literally 30 seconds.
Yes, and the mic, of course, muted.
Yeah, my muted. I was so concerned about everything. So I said we're back all together again on the one road, and going to speak about, as I mentioned at the start of the show, Brittany Griner, excuse me. So the story this week, of course, her wife has said that she's only spoken with her twice since her arrest. Now that is a complete and utter nonsense, but it sounds good for the media. It gets attention, and this is a woman who is receiving the salary from Phoenix, the basketball club where Brittany is still contracted to. She's getting the money from that, and there are some real difficulties now building up with Sherelle Griner, because she's playing the sort of the doting wife back in the States, and a lot of people are not quite happy about that. She was saying she'd cried for 2 or 3 days straight after speaking with her. So basically, the very quick thing here, we see here on the news that, again, this is the New York Times, which this does not do the situation any good at all. She was stopped she was stopped on drug charges at an airport. You don't get stopped on drug charges. You're stopped for carrying drugs. Then you get charged for carrying those drugs. Anyway, this is New York Times. We're not expecting great journalism about them. So the customs officials accused her of carrying vape cartridges with hashish oil in her luggage. They didn't accuse her They found them. She admitted it. She was returning to Russia to play for, well, UMMC, Katerinburg Metal Company, Ekaterinburg. I got sentenced to 9 years. Okay, so and this is the whole situation where they're really, pushing the narrative a bit too far in the wrong direction and causing trouble for Brittany, because this kind of rhetoric is very, very wrong. They're actually telling lies to the readers, and of course the readers don't know better. Isolde, we were discussing this before the show in the chat. Her wife Cheryl, she is really playing up to the audience, and I point out to you that she doesn't call her Brittany. She never called her my wife or Brittany, which Brittany, when she was in Russia, was saying my partner, she said like my partner. But Cheryl calls her BG.
It's a strange one. It isn't something. I suppose when I heard it in the interview she gave with Gayle King for CNN, and when you hear her say it, you kind of think that's what you might refer to a player by their name, or what a fan might call, as opposed to a partner. But then again, look, we don't know what level of stress she's under in the situation. I do completely agree that I don't think it's the right approach to blow up the story in the way they have. The New York Times is just, when you read that out, it's frightening how inaccurate that is. And also to say she's only spoken to her twice, it's a real pull on the heartstrings. But why haven't you spoken to her more than once? Are you suggesting it's being prevented, or are you not making an effort to get in contact? Because I think you had mentioned before, people are obviously going in and she's getting consular assistance.
Yeah.
I am sure they are very willing, and particularly I don't think it's in anyone's interest to not facilitate her speaking to her wife, because optically, if both sides are trying to actually reach some form of agreement, then it's really important that you keep her spirits up. And presumably for most people, they would want to be speaking to their wife. And for her wife, obviously there's a difficult visa situation. You can't necessarily go and just travel to Russia. That's a different thing. But you certainly can make, I would like to think that she would be facilitated in speaking to her wife more than twice. And I completely agree with what you're saying. It was a bizarre way to refer to your partner when it sounded like a teammate.
And this is what I kept. Then I dug into it and I was thinking, no. And it's since the start, I've heard her saying this. The last time when I met Joe Biden, she came out and she said, the president, Mr. President, has BG's best interest at heart. And I mean, we were joking about what our partner would call us. We call our partner would be very. My initials are never used. Lots of words are used, but never my initials. And on a regular basis, and very flowery words as well. But the situation, again, the reporting of it, that she was stopped on drugs charges. You're
never stopped on drugs charges. What you're stopped on is what you have, and that's what causes the charges. The charges come after the incident, unless you're coming into a country where you're being stopped because the other government have notified them and said this person is a wanted person. But it's a very different, and misleading reporting does not help the situation, because as much as the New York Times might think that they're getting their readership looking at this, they forget that there are Russian officials who are looking at everything that's printed in the media in the US also.
This is what I brought this up to us before on the show. We broke it, and I mean, I spoke with different American journalists after this, and they said we can't really. I get them the information. I give them the recordings. I said, look here, guys, listen to it. They didn't want to discuss it simply because, well, we're going to fall foul of the White House. And I got that from a Washington Post reporter here. I don't want to fall foul of the White House. It's like, where's your... Anyway, Andrew, it's a strange one, because it's a lie to say she's only spoken with her twice. She has spoken more than that, because the legal team have facilitated using WhatsApp on their mobile phones at different legal visits, for example, consultations. She's also spoken with her ex-wife a lot more than that as well. So it just seems strange that the New York Times are pushing this, and also that her wife is pushing this as well.
Well, the cynic in me actually thinks it's not all that strange, because it builds a very popular narrative. It's like we said when we focused on this issue about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think it was, and you brought us that exclusive to Capital Sports about the real situation, how it's been built up, how the negotiations or discussions have been going on from both sides. It's about narratives. It's about the image that is being built. And sadly, there is somebody caught in the middle of it who, even before we get to the level of guilt or innocence, it's I don't want to say the word game, but it's a tactical maneuver from both sides. I mean, even on the American side of negotiations, we've seen disunity in the message that's being brought out. The Biden administration's public announcements were noticeably absent in the very first few days and weeks. I noticed that's extraordinary for something that caught so many headlines. And also, I read recently this week, I believe it's a former US ambassador to the UN, was talking about how even he disagrees with the tactics. And I thought that was a fascinating word that he used, the tactics that the Biden administration is using to negotiate what happens to Brittany Griner. Tactics. That for me says it all. It's a competition. It's a maneuver where the people or person, or two people we should be saying, BG and her partner, are caught in the middle, who are basically almost powerless to have much influence on the outcome. I think the narrative is important, because
that is true. That is very, very true. And again, we saw that this week, this past week, where Joe Biden had basically said that they're going now to change the marijuana laws and pardoning thousands of people, but they're on federal law. So there's actually right now, there's nobody eligible for those pardons. And even though it's about time, again, I have never taken drugs. I'm very cautious about drugs, especially like marijuana. I do think it's quite dangerous. However, at the same time, I do understand some people use for medical things. Well, we know that, but at the same time, there needs to be some sort of leveling of it, especially since alcohol is so freely available. Cian, just to close off on this, it's a strange situation with Brittany. We've discussed it before. It's not going to get any better because her appeal is on the 25th of this month. It looks like it's going to be reduced down to 3 years. So with time served, officially time served, she should be out on parole in 6 months. So this is kind of in line with what we had already told before on Capital Sports.
Yeah, it's just purely on a human level that this can come to an amicable conclusion. And as you say, if it goes the way it's been said it may go, she's out in March, April of next year. So here's hoping, as I say, purely on a human level, on a human level, that things go the right way for her and her partners.
Okay, we're going to, before we go off to the break, I want to just play one interesting mashup. It's going to be just a couple of minutes, so just sit back and watch it, okay? The first is the reaction to Gary Neville signing up for beIN Sports, the Qatari-owned broadcaster, to commentate on the World Cup in Qatar. And the second is Gary actually in Qatar. So just take a couple of minutes, sit back, watch it, and I'm going to ask our three brilliant co-hosts just their very quick opinion on it.
He is a hypocrite. He talks about controls in football and brings Peter Lim over to run Salford and breaks salary management cap protocols. He is a hypocrite. He talks about, the players needing to understand there needs to be a reset in football, whilst potentially advising the PFA that there should be no pay cuts to the players. He's a hypocrite. He talks about fans having to behave themselves whilst advocating for fans to mobilise and do things like they did at Manchester United. I am not for this World Cup. I'm also not for the West preaching to the Middle East. So whilst I'm not for this World Cup, we're going to go over there and we're going to broadcast shows from there. Does that make me a hypocrite because I'm not for something and I've said things about it? I've also balanced it up by saying it's not our gift to lecture other people in the world how they should operate in their societies because our Western values are different to theirs. Gary talks a lot of sense about a lot of things and a lot of nonsense about some other things. And in this instance, of course, he's going to be called a hypocrite because you know what you have to do? When you want to advance a cause and you want to be at the front of the queue for doing so, you have to invest some self-sacrifice in that. And no one wants to. Hummel don't want to. Sainsbury's don't want to when they're advertising the fact that we love Pride while selling products to Saudi Arabian stores, which are probably one of the most discriminatory countries in the world towards LGBT issues. And Gary Neville doesn't want to. So let's stop with the lecture. Let's stop with the virtue signalling and just get on with the fact you're the same as everybody else. You have different views. They are conflicted at times. And what your primary view is, what am I in the business of? I'm in the business of Gary Neville.
You've got a minimum of $275 a month for a salary, which is about £220, you know, £55 per week. It feels a little bit uncomfortable. Right. In fact, it feels very uncomfortable. You know, and you say that because, you know, when I come to buy, say, for instance, if I come and buy a bowl of pasta with a beer or a soft drink and a coffee, that's a week's wages.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, we've had extensive surveys talking to workers to see exactly the impact of this particular minimum wage on their families. By and large, they were very receptive to the minimum wage. There's no doubt. I mean, a lot of the workers are here to make as much money as possible. Yeah. They do a lot of savings. There's no doubt about it.
How much would they send back?
I would say upwards of 85% goes back home.
So let's say 80% goes back out of the 275. Yes. That's leaving them with $55 a month to spend.
Qatar Labour allows for working in overtime. And overtime is not just simply one time, it's 1.25 during the week, or it's 1.5 if you work on the weekend.
Right.
And not to mention the tips that we talked about in the hospitality sector.
But I still can't get my head around this sort of number, this $275 a month.
Yeah.
You know, if that was my son, my daughter, my brother, I wouldn't want them to be in this position.
Take into consideration the overtime, take into consideration food and lodging. Yes. This is a more than fair, non-discriminatory, first of its kind in the region, minimum wage.
First time in the region, minimum wage. There's a lot of sense being talked there. From our view, looking at from Western Europe or from North America being Canada and the US, looking at from Australia and New Zealand, we look at this thing, that's very, very little money, and how can do it? What we have to understand is that the people sending money home, the remittances are keeping a lot of these countries afloat. We see it from Russia, where when there was COVID, the downturn and lockdown in Russia, countries like Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, but Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan suffered. Even though their people here were getting, for example, $500-600 to $1,000 a month, sending half of that home at least, living in hostels, struggling as Irish people did before when they went abroad to work in the UK or even in America, sending money home. So is it fair to brand? Now, Simon Jordan, who was speaking there on TalkSport, Martin Keown was there, of course, I met him over here at the World Cup, and with Jim White. Simon Jordan was actually quite fair about that as well. And he did point out that he should have also said, well, I'm here getting paid by Rupert Murdoch to speak on a Murdoch-owned platform. But he was quite fair. Gary, yes, he is hypocritical in doing it, but at the same time, you know, he can make money but also speak out. So should we be hard on Gary or give him a pass on this, or just say, look, it's nothing's going to make a difference?
I suppose I think one of the big things here is that you have to agree that there was a lot of sense actually spoken on both sides of those two clips that you showed there. I think the difficulty here is that if you are going to ask hard questions and make it clear how uncomfortable you are, as opposed to just asking the questions and treating it like you're a reporter who's not passing comment, but rather taking in information and providing it to other people. So this is how much people are earning X amount. Don't then comment and say how uncomfortable you are, because if you feel that uncomfortable with it, while it is great that there is any form of minimum wage in a country where to us it's normal that a minimum wage exists, you can't express your discomfort and then at the same time be comfortable to take on that role. And that's the difficulty. If he didn't give an opinion, perhaps it'd be very much factual, but I think that's the bit that makes it difficult, because you can see he's uncomfortable. I don't think that's put on. I think he is a great advocate for so many different causes, and he's also very, very good to speak his mind. He's a man who I think is probably designed for politics in the future, but in some capacity, whether it's Manchester City in that capacity or further on. But I think we really do need to, the minute you express an opinion about something, you go from simply reporting to being a person who obviously has feelings on it.
And look, in fairness, he was the funding to send him to Qatar, of course, and he was is by Sky, who's owned by Rupert Murdoch. Talksport also owned by Rupert Murdoch, and his
Some might
salary.
suggest Rupert has the whole thing spinning around to the way he wants, and everyone's talking about his guys.
Exactly, and the most brilliant thing is that the overlap is sponsored by, I think it's by Sky Bet. Gary has also interviewed David Beckham, who of course is getting multiple millions from Qatar to be their ambassador. Never asked him a question about it. He also interviewed Tyson Fury. I never asked him about drugs. And when we say that, I also know there's one very, very good reporter for New York Times, Tariq Panja, who interviewed, was it Neymar? Yeah, it was Neymar or Kylian Mbappe, and didn't ask about Qatar. And made the excuse, well, we ran out of time. But we know Tariq, he's been on us on the show. There are restrictions. Andrew, on that, I mean, as a Reds fan, I mean, Gary Neville, I mean, he again, as Isa said, there's a balance on it. He spoke well on things. Should we be hard on him?
Yes, in a word, yes, we should. I think he's gone 50% of the way. He's asking the questions, but I think Isa makes a brilliant point there. How you ask the questions. Ask the reporter, as in simply by the very definition of the word report, reporting the words without any emotion, without any showing your opinion in any way. I think you've got to go further on a matter like this if you're asking those sort of questions, because otherwise you become their mouthpiece. You're legitimizing a point that somebody might be making. Now, that little clip you showed, the person who was interviewing tried to say you've got to remember overtime, but said it was a time and a quarter. So basically saying just work more and you'll have a bit more money. He didn't relate it to living costs or how much you need to spend. Like, look, it sounds like a not very much in the West, but over here it's enough. He didn't make those sort of points. Gary should have pushed him on those sort of things. So I think personally, I'm very, very skeptical about his ability as a political voice and motivator, simply because it's become a very popular line. Gary Neville's a great voice for the people. I personally think he's been swept along by this. He makes a few tweets a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, about the Glazers. The Glazers family taking over Manchester United. Well, that's the easiest target in the world. And he got a lot of retweets and he started tweeting a bit more. And I think, honestly, he just got swept along by it. He's always, the crowd is saying, go on, Gary, go on, you say it. You're a Manchester United player fighting out against Manchester United. When it comes to this is a far bigger issue. And he didn't push home like a true professional interviewer should. Now, he's a professional footballer, or former professional footballer, who, because of his name, because of his playing career, has got this job as an interviewer. That's how he's got the connections. But he needs to be asking and pushing home if he's going to ask these questions, or don't ask them at all. So because he's getting the best of both worlds, he's having his cake and eating it, basically. So I think, yes, we should be hard.
He's believing his own. He's got to believe his own hype. Then he's become to believe
exactly.
His own hype. That's a fair enough take on it. I do feel that. Cian, I mean, with Gary, in regards to what Simon Jordan was saying, Simon Jordan did say about Qatar, and he has been consistent to this. Sometimes Simon Jordan gets on my nerves, but same as anyone, and we all get each other's nerves. But Simon Jordan was right, and he's consistently said, we shouldn't be forcing our Western values, because Gary spoke about you can buy drink here and this. We saw this week where an infographic, which was a fake, went viral about Qatar. You can't date, women have to be modest, so on and so forth. Cian, in that sense, should we cut Gary some slack, or should he even dare at all? Should he be put in there? Is he just a useful idiot for Murdoch?
I suppose the fact that he's working for Sky and he's going to work for BIN as well during the World Cup, it's a tricky situation, a bit like Andrew said earlier on. Do you really want to bite the hand that feeds you? It's we all get conflicted. We all have opinions on different things, and some of the time those strong opinions that we have on certain things, we have to kind of swallow them and just let things happen. It's been a very, very interesting, probably 6 to 12 months to listen to the likes of Gary Neville, to listen to Simon Jordan, to listen to all these people, and to hear them speak about these things. We all, I think, it definitely comes into it when a World Cup or an Olympics happens. You hear about certain things in the media in the 6-12 months before the event, and then it fades out maybe in the weeks after each of these events. So here's hoping that these things are being brought to people's attention and it stays in people's psyche after the World Cup finishes in early December. It'll be interesting to see can things be done to try and sort certain issues out.
Yeah, will it, when these improvements that they're speaking about, will it continue or not? Okay, we are going to go to a break right now very, very quickly, and then we'll come back and speak about the Ben Eubank Jr. fiasco. So just stick with us. We'll be back in 30 seconds.
However, you can get around the random drug testing because between the hours of 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., they're not allowed to come to your house. You seem to go time rest. So a lot of athletes can take very fast-acting testosterone or growth hormones, which can leave your body, which can only be in your body for 7 or 8 hours. So you could take it at sort of 9 or 10 p.m. and it would be out of your system by 7, 8 in the morning. Does that make sense? So there are ways that can get around it. Like there's a lot of ways, they may take a diuretic to flush out, what they've been taking. There's a lot of tricks, especially when you get to the higher level, the elite level, level, maybe European, they'll find every possible way of winning. And you got to think about it when they're out of camp, when they're not in training camp, unless they're enrolled in the WBC clean boxing all year round random blood testing. What's stopping them doping when they're out of season?
And we have just heard the wise words of a GP, Dr. Usman Sajjad, who was, up until this week, very widely publicised on his own Instagram, Twitter, and also, I think, his TikTok bio as a GP who specialises in sports medicine and consults with Joe Joyce, Tyson Fury, Paddy Pimblett, and Conor Benn. Conor Benn being the reason we are going to be delving into boxing this evening. So this weekend, I should not be speaking to you at all. I should be currently in an airport flying back from seeing Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr.'s fight last night. But unfortunately, as of Thursday, or fortunately as the case may be, the fight was decided to no longer proceed. And the reason this fight didn't happen was not because of a failed drug test, which did in fact happen under the VADA program, where the voluntary test returned by Conor Benn was positive for clomiphene, which is a female fertility drug when taken by men, has an effect on their testosterone. But rather because the story about this was leaked to the newspapers in the UK, which led to the British Board of Boxing Control, who had been aware of the failed test at all times since the failed result was returned, coming out with a statement to suggest that they did not feel and would not sanction the fight because it was not in the interest of boxing. Obviously, a VADA test is a voluntary association. Conor had not failed any of the UCAD tests, so the British board cannot, in fact, suspend him as of yet, but we'll see how that goes into the future. And the reason this is so poignant is because were it not for the leaked media story, this fight would have proceeded. And that is really frightening. And it's made slightly more poignant. And in a way, I think it's very important to give the history of this. Conor Benn is Nigel Benn's son. Chris Eubank Jr. is, as the name suggests, the son of Chris Livingston Eubank, or Senior as he is more affectionately known. In the early 90s, both fathers fought each other in two absolutely titanic battles in boxing. But not only that, both fathers were involved in some of the most gruesome of fights in the modern era. In the case of Chris Eubank, he fought against Michael Watson in 1991. The fight ended with Watson having life-altering injuries as a result of it. That was with no failed tests or no suggestion of drugs. That was just two men going at it in a ring. Michael Watson, thankfully, has made a large part of a recovery, but still has life-altering changes as a result of that fight. And as a result of the fight, Chris Eubank Jr. suffered hugely with mental health difficulties because of what he had inflicted on Michael Watson. 4 years later in 1995, in an unfortunately titled fight billed as Sudden Impact, Nigel Benn was involved in a fight with Gerald McClellan, which resulted in McClellan, unlike Michael Watson, suffering from injuries from which he has not yet recovered in any tangible manner and continues to require 24-hour care. We move on to the Suns, and Chris Eubank Jr. was involved in a fight some years ago against Nick Blackwell, where his father, coming into his corner and seeing history repeat itself, again had to instruct his son to punch his opponent to the body and not risk hitting him in the head because he could see how things were going. Nick Blackwell subsequently collapsed in the changing room after the fight and has made in large parts a full recovery, but nevertheless it's been a very difficult road for him. What happened this week has shown that boxing does not care about its competitors, because to risk a man in Chris Eubank Jr., who would have gone in weight depleted and with a strict rehydration clause due to the fact that he is the heavier man and they were fighting at a catch weight, fighting a man who the other side, and indeed Chris Eubank Jr. also knew, had failed a drugs test, is horrific. And the only reason we're even discussing this is because the Daily Mail got the story. Otherwise, I'd be flying back from the fight. And depending on how the result went, we would never have heard that one fighter had failed a drugs test. And this has now put boxing in possibly the worst position it's been in on a professional level for quite some time, because the eyes of the world were literally on boxing this weekend, similar to when Jarrell Miller was meant to fight AJ. When all the eyes of the non-boxing supporters out there, or casuals as they're occasionally termed, are looking, boxing manages to knock itself out.
Isel, very well said, very well put. I'm older than all of you probably put together, and I remember the days when Chris Eubank...
Your maths is dodgy.
Possibly, yeah. Well, I'm an archaeologist, that's it. I remember when, and I went to some of the fights and I watched them religiously when, Ben, Eubank, Collins, Watson, Dan Sherry from Canada as well, terrific fighter. All these really, really good fighters put boxing back on the main stage. And it wasn't heavyweights, which for a long time was the heavyweights. We had Frank Bruno, we had Lennox Lewis, but the middleweights and super middleweights actually made boxing prime time, because we had Harold Graham, who was the most unfortunate fighter, who almost breaking through, never did at the time, but by goodness, Eubank, Ben, Watson, McClellan as well, so many great fighters. Just want to quickly run around for this because we are over on time. I want to leave the last word on this with Isel. Andrew, this is a terrible situation because we do know that, as with rugby, using drugs, doping, you're putting someone's life in danger as well as your own life in danger as well. And this is not just a body blow to boxing. Boxing is down on one knee taking account.
Yes, exactly. I mean, of all sports, I would argue boxing possibly is right at the top of this list of I think a major problem across many sports is a pseudo macho desire to prove you can carry on after a knock. We've seen it so many times. You get knocked down to show the strength of character to come back up is a major positive, regardless of what's happened before. With head injuries in particular in American football, last weekend we were talking about the Dolphins quarterback who came back and should never have been allowed to come back in 4 days later. This week I've been trying to follow quite how many strands of it. And this is what I find absolutely astonishing as a relative outsider to boxing. How could it be so vague and so many loopholes in what is about the most fundamental aspect of whether a boxing contest goes ahead or not. Are they fit to fight? Are they doping or not? I mean, that should be absolutely categorical. And it seems everybody wants to blame somebody else about it. Boxing as a sport simply cannot possibly allow that to happen. I'm astonished as to how. I didn't even know there was something called the voluntary anti-doping association. That sounds awful as a sports journalist. I genuinely didn't even know it existed. How can it voluntary? What do you mean? Anti-doping being voluntary? What? How has boxing allowed this mess to happen? I don't understand.
I would just point out that's because UCAD are, not exactly like, and a lot of the main doping organizations don't have the capabilities to test regularly enough. So this is boxing's way of saying, oh, look, on anyone you don't have, it doesn't just have to be boxing, but it's their way of saying we're signing up to a program where we know you'll be regularly tested. As it happens, Eubank Jr. was tested last night.
Well, okay, then there's one very, very simple solution here. If UCAD are not fit for purpose, they should not be in charge of anti-doping. If they do not have the capability of checking doping, they should not be in charge of it.
But Andrew, look, we with VADA, we interviewed on Capital Sports Margaret Goodman, who is the head of VADA. So just so you know,
brilliant.
Yeah, and she's very, very good. I grilled her as well. I asked her about Don Catlin, who works with them there as well. And I asked her, and like off the air, we had a very good chat about it. We're in the studio with Double N, and I think Andy Mack, and we spoke on the phone about it as well. And she did not speak openly, because Don Catlin, if you remember, was the guy who said, go speak with Grigory Rodchenkov. Remember that? He started it off because, again, Don Catlin is part of the network of people who are involved in anti-doping. Mind these people are also involved in doping as well, because they understand what goes on. So they can advise people what to do, when to do it, how to do it. Because as we heard in the little clip from the good doctor was, if you do it at this time, between 2 and 6, it'll be out of your body by the time they come to check you. So it's very hard. We can blame. I kick UCAD for the crap they pulled here in Russia. I've kicked USADA for their behavior. But, Joe Papp told me, no, USADA, he sees the good points. I've kicked USADA or WADA, but it's not them who are at fault. They're not doping. It's the athletes. It's the coaches. It's us as fans who want to see when the New Zealand All Blacks come up and they're smashing the crap out of people and they can still get up and go on again. And we're going, like we spoke last week, we're cheering at these massive tackles, but then the guys have to have hip replacements. So it's a horrific, ever decreasing circle. And with this one with Isolt, I was shocked all week. Okay, Cian, your take on this. Sorry, I know Andrew, you want to come back here, but I'll go to Cian first and then come back to you and then to Isolt. Cian.
Yeah, just listening to all of that, just Steve Thompson springs to mind. I know not to do with drugs, but it just Steve Thompson's documentary this week just springs to mind immediately. Seeing the effect of hard hits on Steve Thompson, watching that hour-long program was absolutely terrifying, because at 3 or 4 different moments in the program, Steve Thompson couldn't remember his children's names. He couldn't remember what he was doing at that particular moment. And at one particular stage, he said he was fishing one day for 3 hours, left the car running for 3 hours. So just, it ties in ever so slightly with the drug story there and the boxing, that it just, on a human level, again, it shows the side effects of all of the stuff that's wrong with sport, I think, Alan.
Yeah, that is fair enough on that. I mean, it's funny because you have, if you go to VADA, so it's vada-testing.org. They have a picture of Conor Benn doing this, and it says that this is on the 26th of August. VADA welcomes Conor Benn to our program as he prepares to face Chris Eubank Jr. October 8th, 2022 at London O2 Arena. Andrew, very quickly to you and then back to Isolt, because I was surprised for Isolt to play.
Well, look, I mean, I totally understand what Isolt was suggesting about, look, sometimes a matter of sheer manpower, the number of people to thoroughly conduct anti-doping could be an issue. Well, I mean, look, get more people or don't do anti-doping testing. You simply can't pick and choose when and where, leave holes, leave gaps in it like this. I mean, okay, you can say it's not UKAD's fault. But I actually disagree. I think we can blame them for either not admitting that we simply don't have the manpower we need to outsource even, but do it openly so everybody knows the exact procedure that is followed. Either do that or just say, look, I'm sorry, we just can't do it. Somebody else do it. It's not good enough to just say, oh, we don't have enough people, we don't have the resources. Find the resources.
Andrew, you're right on that. It's not that they have. It's not that they have. Issa's right. They do pick forums of where they get it. They get it in amateur rugby players. They get it in, like in USADA, age group cyclists. A 90-year-old cyclist fails a drug test. If you're cycling at 90, you'd want to be on drugs. I'd expect you to be on drugs. And that's what they do. They pick and choose, Andrew. And it's when I saw what they did in Russia, the amount of money that was being spent here that they were taking from the Russian taxpayer, supposedly to clean things up. And all they did was cheat smarter, cheat cleaner. And I'm being deadly serious about that. What they did very well was, if you want to take this, you use a TUE, therapeutic use exemption. And they were going around speaking with different sports federations. If your athletes are sick, you take these. So you fill out these so you can, and we see how easy it is. We see how easy it is to get these drug exemptions. We've seen it with all the Americans, the British, Germans. I mean, I'm worried about the Norwegian winter sports team, the ski team, the cross country team. If they go to to Saudi Arabia, the Winter Olympics in Saudi Arabia, the dust from the desert alone is going to trigger their asthma so badly that they're going to double the amount of inhalers that they currently use to cheat their way to glory. Issa, last word with you on this, and then I have a little surprise for you.
I suppose there's a lot to take in from what's gone on this week. It's the fact that it wouldn't have come to light first had it not been for the reporting and the leaking that makes this such a difficult one for boxing to swallow. And I think we also do need to be really conscious of the fact that if people say that VADA, because it's voluntary, is the gold standard because you are assuming that you want them to come and test you as opposed to randomized testing, then you can't suddenly turn around and say, well, it's okay because Conor Benn tested cleanly for all of the UKAD tests, which are less in number and less in frequency, obviously, as a result. Boxing has a really difficult path ahead of it to redeem itself in the eyes of a lot of people, including those who adore the sport. And it'll just be interesting to see in a sport where it's not just a professional game that needs a complete overhaul. It's very difficult for people to see how we get out of this.
Very true, very true. We saw with amateur boxing the absolute disgraceful scenes, and I don't go into it because it's an embarrassment, and it just shows how corrupt they all are, and the little favors being done back and forth, and ultimately passports don't matter. Money does, and power does. This is for Issa to enjoy. This is something that you wanted. It is 2 little videos. You can comment on the first one, Issa, to explain what it was. Okay.
You're sorry to sell him.
Good boy. I'll do the sauce, Mrs. Mack.
You cook like a Frenchman.
What, the Hollandaise?
No, the Carrigo.
I'm going to be serving now, any minute.
Would you like some more?
No.
Hey, Dad. Who's taking the horse to France?
That is rather cringe. It's a butter ad, and I'm talking about who's going to take the horse to France.
There's a lot of innuendos in that. There's a lot going on. And my favourite person in all of that is the angry mother in the kitchen being like, you two, will you get out of my kitchen with your leering at each other over some dairy products, please?
Do you know what? If I was the granny or the mother, I'd have put the pot of potatoes over your woman's head. She's like, you cook like a Frenchman.
Saucy little French one commenting on the hollandaise.
Yeah,
I was going to say, that was the rudest part.
I'd say, shut up, you French tart. Get out into the garden and dig some spuds or something. What the hell are you at? Now, it does get worse. It does get worse.
Oh, no.
This gets worse. I'll do this, and then I'm going to have what happens next. But people who are hanging on with us, just relax for a moment and listen carefully.
No, talk at once. Michael, would you ever get us a few potatoes?
Those two French lads seem to be enjoying themselves.
Le poisson. Hello. There is something I can eat?
Well, you could spread a bit of butter on my arse, Andre.
Ah, we may need another pack.
Cheeky.
You have quite a big goop, huh?
Kerrygold, the best tasting butter in the world.
That's kind of a parody on the original, which is worse.
That is not the branding that Kerrygold used. I feel I should say this from a legal point of view in case Kerry Group see this. This was not their official ad, and perhaps might have insinuated that their butter was some sort of lubricant, which probably isn't the best idea.
You have to go there. You have to.
I'm just clarifying.
I'm just going to say it before anybody else, if everybody's thinking it, that is going to sell more than saying, oh, it tastes nice and creamy. Look, let's be honest, sex sells. And I mean, what people do with butter is up to them, but
in 90s, 80s,
I'm going to remember that.
Granny giving out sold, not.
Yeah.
I'm traumatized.
We're all talking about this is Kerrygold butter, so it's golden butter from Kerry, from the kingdom. Cian, you're in Kerry right now.
Yeah.
Are there French lads and women knocking around the place?
Not really, no. But I have a cousin of mine is actually fairly high up with Kerry Group, so I'd want to be very careful. But no, they're not knocking around. No, I have never seen Kerrygold used in that particular fashion. I've been involved with radio for 13 years, and this has been the strangest 3 or 4 minutes I think I've ever had.
Welcome to our world.
We're all feeling the same way, apart from Alan, who knew this was coming, which makes it a little bit more bizarre.
Okay, so this is what happens next now, right? So now we're going to round off on a nice thing. This is not a Kerrygold ad, trust me on that. Okay, so I'm going to play the first 10 seconds and then you tell me what happens next.
I mean, Turichova's control was immense. I mean, we had the example at the World Cup at Wembley when she came.
So, Ludmila Turichova, 1976, the World Cup at Wembley. What happened next, Andrew Flint?
Well, she landed absolutely perfectly and got scored 10 from judges. Absolutely nothing went wrong at all, right? No, obviously not. I'm going to assume she lands on her arm and breaks her arm or something horrific like that.
Okay. Isolt.
She goes to land, but when it doesn't go wrong, she springs to give a final landing.
Okay, all right. I'm picturing in my mind. Okay, that's
which means
wrong,
it isn't the right answer.
It's the wrong answer, but it's interesting. Cian.
The bar snaps and she still lands the move.
You're getting the win for this because you were so close. This is amazing. This is historic. When you watch it, you'll just be like, holy God. But the most important thing is watch her reaction. Watch her reaction.
I mean, Turichova's control was immense. I mean, we had the example at the World Cup at Wembley when she came off the asymmetric bars, and as she dismounted off it, the bars collapsed.
And the apparatus has collapsed. But she finished her exercise. Now I wonder how that's going to be marked.
And she didn't really look behind to see what was happening, because as far as she was concerned, that was irrelevant to the performance that she'd just done.
Now, I wonder whether the judges will
The discipline of that.
Stone Cold Robot. She could be a serial killer and get away with it. Just
the way she reacted to it, just kind of like, I'm
happened before, no problem.
Yeah, and I had to. It just is amazing. Just like, I wonder, was she just kind of in shock, or just kept walking? But anyway, I'm sorry. We're keeping Eastwood past her bedtime, so we're
sorry, it was in the background. I'm seeing the highlights of the Arsenal-Liverpool game. It's putting me to sleep.
Okay, that's forgiven. So on that note, say thank you very, very much, Isolt, Andrew, and Cian. Cian, you're the champion tonight for that. But then again, we tortured you with Kerrygold butter, which I'm sure it is being used in torture somewhere around the world. Not in Russia, because they stopped importing it in 2014. Just have a great week, guys. Thank you very, very much again, and thank you for your time and patience and brilliance as well.
No problem.
Thank you very much.
Next week already.
Have a good week, everyone.
Thank
You too.
Folks, on that note, say good night. Take care to everyone. As always, our guys give up their time. They are absolutely brilliant. They're professional. They're superb. And next week, we'll have Alexander Zotov on. He is not well at the moment. He's had a bit of a temperature. I'm going to speak with him tomorrow because there's an awful lot to discuss with him next week. And also, we will have a special on Friday night. A preview, so watch that, or watch out for that. We're going to have a little bit of a preview leading up to it. On Friday night, we will have a chat with Davy Lane about horse racing. So until then, I'm Adam Moore saying take care of yourselves and each other.